Hey everybody, Ron Tite here. Now, you may have heard of the book Think, Do, Say that I wrote, and you may have heard the speech. You may have watched videos or heard me on podcasts or things like that. Now, that stuff it's really great and it's inspiring for organizations. In a keynote kind of context, it works really, really well. But there's also a layer beneath that, a layer that really isn't appropriate for keynotes, but is appropriate on a really, really granular level, where Think, Do, Say can act as a brand operating system or as an operating system for an entire organization. So what I thought I would do is I would run you through that, walk you through how you can use Think, Do, Say as a process to come up with your operating system for your brand or your organization. So that's what we're going to cover today. Now, what I thought I would do is constantly apply it to one consistent organization so you get a feel for how it's applied. So who better than our own organization? So here's Think, Do, Say applied to Church and State. So this is the book that we use, and it is the book that guides all of our thinking. But this, again, is a more granular strategic level of how this operating system can be applied to brands and organizations. Now, this is the process that we follow, and it's a little bit cumbersome here that you see, but really when you break it down, there is a think part, there is a do part, and there is a say part. And regardless of the organization, regardless of what the task is, we always use this exact same process. Now, some clients may have some of these buckets already filled in. They've already done the work. And when they come to us, we slot that in and say, we're going to focus on the do, or we're just going to focus on certain aspects of the say. But we follow this process every single time. So let's break it down. Well, on the think side, what do we have here? What do we do? Now, we know, if you've heard, that the think part is really about elevating the conversation so that you have a fundamental belief that your organization, that your brand, that your management team fundamentally believes in. Now, for you Simon Sinek fans, this, of course, is the why you're in business, not the what or the how. Now, to arrive at that, it's not, you can't just go like, okay, shift F8 and what's our brand belief? No, we have to make sure that that brand belief is strategically sound. So how do we arrive at that? Well, my partner, Daniel Langer-Hack, who's our chief strategy officer and a partner at the agency, and his team kind of focus on this area. So what do? Well, one of the first things they do is we look at this kind of this diagram. So you see that there are really two parts at play here. On one side, there's the macrocultural trends. Now, macrocultural trends are things that are going on in the world that may not be directly related to your line of business or to your organization or to your brand, but they're things that you really should consider. They're big, big, big global things that are happening that are relevant to your organization or to your brand. Then once we've established those, well, then we do deep dives on the target. And the target is really the individual or the group of people where you make most of your revenue from. It doesn't have to embody everybody, but the main target that you go after, who is that? We do a deep dive on that. Then we do a deep dive on the brand, the equities of the brand, the heritage of the brand, the legacy of the brand. And if the brand's new, kind of the expectations for the brand and why this brand was created in the first place. And then lastly, we'll look at the category, which is from the frame of reference for who else does the target look at? Where do they get their information from? Where do they get their research? And where do they buy their services or products from? Now, you'll see that the overlap between what the target wants and what the brand delivers, that's why you're relevant. You need to protect that. So that's your brand relevance. The overlap between what the brand delivers and what nobody in the category delivers, well, this is your brand difference. This is what makes you unique when compared to your competition. And the third part is the overlap between what the target wants and what nobody in the category, including you, delivers. That's your brand opportunity. So you got to keep one, you got to dial one up, and you have to explore one. Brand relevance, brand difference, and brand opportunity. But let's take a look at some macrocultural trends first, shall we? Okay, so if we're Church and State and we have macrocultural trends, well, what do these look like? Now, from a legacy standpoint, in the broad world that we're operating in, how do we look at the world through our lens? Well, we have to go back because if you can imagine by our name, Church and State, and the plus sign in our logo, it was a very specific choice. It's not Church ampersand State. It's Church+State. It is the unification of church and state. It is the unification of advertising and content. But what are the macrocultural trends that kind of feed into that? Well, look, the separation of church and state goes all the way back to the origins of advertising. That the ads that funded content models, be it television networks or print magazines, well, those ads really couldn't influence that content. They could not influence editorial. It was a separation of church and state. People came for the shows, but those shows were paid for by the advertisers. So the broadcasters and the media companies, they rented out pages to people. And the people who bought those pages or bought those 30-second spots, well, they could do whatever the heck they wanted with them. That's the legacy of big media. It was a small group of players who controlled the creation and the distribution of that because there were very few people who could do it. You can't just start a TV network. It's really, really difficult. So the establishment from media were really, really dependent. Their business wasn't in the shows. Their business was always in the ads. That's where they made their money. And they just created the shows so that people had something to look at and advertisers had eyeballs that they wanted to appeal to. So the entire model was based on having those eyeballs watching your content and reading your articles and looking and listening to your content. That is the legacy model. Now, what happened here was three things. One was the lower cost of production. The cost of production drastically went down. So you didn't need to be a big studio, a big production house to make TV shows, to make radio programs, to make print magazines. You didn't need to do that. The cost of production went down. Now this opens up the media establishment. New players are allowed to come in. The other thing that they got was global distribution. So now you didn't need somebody to distribute your content. You could do it yourself like that. So when you combine really low cost of production and instantaneous and global distribution, what you get is this desire to create and consume niche content. So why is niche content really, really important? It's because the existing media establishment was all at the lowest common denominator. But niche content is the stuff that will beat that every single time. Those niche interests you have, which is really difficult to find content on. When you find it, you will geek out on it 24/7. And so what happened was the eyeballs went away from the media establishment. They started to look at niche content, and they could look at that anywhere they wanted to. Look, everybody says that the traditional business model for media is struggling, and that there is this myth that we've created that really has done a disservice to the model. You know, people have said, oh, people don't have the attention span for great content, or that everyone expects content over the internet for free. Wrong. We've never paid more for content than we are right now. You know what I have at home? You know what I have? I have content streaming subscriptions to pretty much every single platform. I'm paying more for content now than I ever have. Why? Because it's the content that I want. It's incredible. It's niche. It's really specific. It's high quality, and we love it. The second thing that really has disrupted the traditional media model is that we're just consuming it in different places. And I get that it's not that easy to move an entire model over to a mobile device world. I get that. But those are the kind of, those big industry trends. We went from this world where advertising and content were black and white. There was a very clear separation between the two. This was an ad and this was content. And then what happened? Well, we still have those elements of black and white, but in the middle, there's a whole bunch of gray area. The lines have been blurred between advertising and content. Some people think that's a bad thing. We think it's a good thing. Why? Well, because content is advertising. Advertising is content. That's what's created now. That any ad can actually be a piece of content that is shared and consumed with great interest if it's good enough. And any piece of content that is interesting and relevant can also be an ad if it's responsible and authentic enough, if we're honest enough about the intentions of that piece of content. Advertising is content, content is advertising. And lo and behold, we get the unification of church and state. So those are those kind of outside world forces that are happening really specifically with media. Now, for brands and organizations, there's another force at play here. Now, we often use this metaphor of that the average consumer is standing in the middle of Times Square, and they're bombarded. They're bombarded on two levels. On the top part of Times Square, this is where your legacy brands are. You need legacy to be there, because those spots on the top part of Times Square are really, really expensive. And because they're really expensive, the production values are really, really good. And because there's so much money spent on placement and production, now you get more eyes on it. It's maybe a little bit too scripted. It's maybe a little bit too perfect. And the reality is all those brands that are up top of Times Square, they're a little further removed from the reality of the street. So the consumer doesn't know where to look because they're getting it from all sides and they're shouting. All the big brands are trying to outspend one another. Now, down on street level, this is a completely different level of entrepreneur, because this entrepreneur, they can be more nimble, they can be more aggressive, they can be more targeted. And we've seen this. Pretty much every category is being disrupted by insurgent forces. The establishment is being taken out by insurgent forces who are all those things. They're more authentic, more nimble, more aggressive, more targeted. And they're solving problems that the establishment, who is further away from the reality of the street, may not understand or even be open to understanding. The problem is, down on street level, while we have some great businesses down there that are doing amazing things, they're also mixed up with a bunch of other businesses. Someone's selling a fake t-shirt over there and someone's selling fake Gucci's. So we're not exactly sure whether that business is going to be around tomorrow. And because they're an insurgent force, we're not really sure what their business model is. This is why the rise of explainer videos. Explainer videos exist because people are coming up with completely new business models, and those business models need to be explained. So on one hand, the consumer doesn't know where to look. On the other hand, they don't know who to trust. This is at the heart of every prospect and customer and client and consumer relationship you have. So those are those big forces. Now, when we look at this, now we've got those big macrocultural trends. Now let's do some deep dives, okay? Let's take a look at the target. Well, the first thing is, if we are applying this to church and state, who's our target? Now, we, of course, deal with a wide variety of different organizations in different categories, and we deal with individuals for personal brands. But the target, for the sake of this exercise, should really be that primary target where you make most of your money from. Now, who is the primary target of church and state? Well, it is CMOs of large businesses, and it is CMOs of growth businesses. We don't spend a lot of time in early stage startups. Why? Well, because we just feel that those people may not have the budget that are in line with what we charge for our services. We also feel that there's often kind of owner-operators, entrepreneurs who are there who may not be the most sophisticated marketers, who may not be open to hearing the things that we have to say. Why? Well, because they're bootstrapping it, or they're really they're just in the trenches trying to make it work. And that's not where we do our best work. It's completely relevant. It's important for them, but it's not where we do our best work, and so we don't really focus on those types of organizations. We focus on CMOs and VPs of marketing of large businesses and of growth businesses. Okay, so what do those people want? Well, there's this kind of low-grade anxiety for many marketing departments because we know that ROI is really, really critical. For years, they didn't know where their marketing dollars were going and what was working and what wasn't working. And as we've introduced digital aspects to their business, there's even more insecurity because there's all this news of fake views and fake clicks and all that kind of stuff. So there's an insecurity about the performance of advertising. There's a tech stack of 5,000 products. There's so many new platforms. So it's a bewildering world for marketers, and they really, really, really have some insecurity about where their marketing dollars are going. They're under scrutiny to validate their decision-making with relevant data from those people around them. And they often have their own revenue optimization and growth agenda within marketing as well as in the broader organization. So look, their targets have to be aligned with the CEO's target, but they also know that they can't compromise the right brain, brand champion, creative thinking that has been a part of marketing for so long. It's this really insecure balance between how do I get the data and the insights and the metrics so that I can perform, my marketing perform, and I can continually drive the cost down, while at the same time, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, I want to ensure that our work is original and unique and creative. And so conventional agency models, which are either exclusively left brain or right brain, they're just not keeping up. Now, another key insight here about CMOs of large organizations and growth organizations is that they want help getting unstuck. And unstuck is really this idea that I need to grow. I need to grow this organization, I need to grow this brand as a marketer. And look, we know it's harder than ever to reach consumers with a million different platforms. We know that budgets are now sliced and diced across a million different ways. That marketers are being told that they have to do more with less. There's less resources than ever before. And in an infinite world of infinite choice, look, awareness just doesn't mean what it used to. Those old conversion models, they no longer apply. And we know that, to quote Sarah Armstrong from Coca-Cola, that we need ideas at the pace of technology. We need to keep up. So we need to inspire growth. So in order to break through, look, brands need to employ this kind of the same behaviors and strategies that the best of breed media companies have used to maintain relevance. How do we grow? How do we win that battle for time? This is what's on the mind of most CMOs. It's the balance between those two things. I'm really insecure about the performance of my marketing. I'm not exactly sure the balance between that and creative and right brain thinking, and I need growth. And growth has never been more difficult than it is right now. The old models no longer apply. So if we look at those things and we come up with an insight for the target, well, the target insight for us at Church+State is, in a world where attention and trust are scarce, brands need to be media properties, and media properties need to be brands. Every brand out there needs to act like a media property. They need to be creating content. They need to have credible content. They need to be using that content to drive revenue. And there is an advertising and content model embedded right within brands themselves. They need to explore that. At the same time, for media properties to exist, they need to go beyond the individual platform that they've defined themselves on. If you're a radio brand, you need to think beyond radio. So media properties need to act like brands, and brands need to act like media properties. That's the section on the target. Now, when we move to the brand, there are equities of the brand of Church+State and of its predecessor, the Tight Group, that really go into and should be examined when designing our path forward, when applying this operating system. So what are those brand equities? Well, there are a number of them. One, we're three partners, Robin Whalen, Daniel Langer-Hack, and myself, and all three of us came from big global agencies. So we have that experience and we know that. The agency started really as a content marketing agency as we started to explore this world of media and brands. And when we started the agency, we didn't even know there was a thing called content marketing. In fact, I wrote the line, brands need to be media properties and media properties need to be brands. And it was somebody who said to me, oh, you mean content marketing? I didn't even know that existed. So we have a content marketing legacy to us, even though 6 months into it, when Facebook algorithm changed, it was like, oh, everything's an ad, right? We have to amplify that content if we wanted to cut through. So that really changed it, but it is certainly part of our legacy. Speaking is part of our legacy and is certainly a critical part of that, not only from a biz dev standpoint, but being on the road and getting exposed to different organizations where I'm constantly challenged to apply our thinking to that specific situation. It all makes everybody in the agency smarter and better at what we all do. Of course, our staff are all content natives. These are people from a wide variety of advertising and journalism backgrounds who know this new ecosystem of content and advertising. And then finally, because Daniel and Robin and I have been around a long time, me longer than them, we have client relationships from the past. And these client relationships are really critical. They're really critical to us as human beings, that we put those relationships ahead of anything else. And that doesn't mean the relationships of the people who pay us money. We put relationships with people ahead of that. And if we can't help them, we will find somebody who will help them. Because those relationships are critical, not to the business, but to our spirit. Now, the brand has some barriers to growth. Those barriers to growth, well, they kind of include the things that our clients think we do. Because the work we do for specific clients, well, they typically define us as that. So for some clients, we're a social media agency that develops social content and deploys social content. And often we say, well, we do a ton of brand work. We do a ton of consulting work. And the clients who maybe have us for social work don't understand that. So we are defined by the activities we do for certain clients in their own mind. We also, because we're an agency, I think people assume we really focus on the say part of think, do, say, and not so much on the think and the do, even though a ton of work we do is focused on the think and the do. So all those together, we have a value prop for this agency, which is really kind of part of the legacy then, right? The equity of the agency. Our value prop as an agency built on a foundation of deep content expertise combined with extensive experience in advertising and branding, we are uniquely positioned to help clients navigate the colliding worlds of advertising and content. There are ad agencies and there are content agencies, but we think there are very, 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 very few agencies that unite those worlds together. That's why we're different. Now, out of that, we end up with this agency premise that marketing is no longer about platforms or promises or tactics or medias or social or even digital. It's about attention and it's about trust. Remembering Times Square. It is about attention and it is about trust. So how do you build those things? Two very scarce things in a world where other things are not so scarce anymore. So this balance between cutting through and earning trust is really something that we've just kind of summarized, that when you do that, when you seize attention and when you build trust, you get brand conviction. You build brand conviction. This happens when consumers hold they develop a firmly held belief, understanding, or opinion about your brand. That's what brand conviction is. Now, when we then look at the category, well, who else are we competing against? Well, of course, the agency world is changing, right? How many times have we heard this? Well, it is changing. It's changing because we've got the rise of internal agencies, which are really affecting the world of how clients and agencies, external agencies, interact with one another. So the rise of internal agencies, the rise of the consultants, and you can listen to episode 1 of The Coup, Here Come the Consultants, where we do a deep dive on why that is changing the nature of our business, of marketing and advertising. Because Deloitte and PwC and Accenture, they're now at the table. Now, what has happened is the ecosystem has changed and new players have kind of come in. There's a million different type of agencies, all who are trying to eat each other's lunch. And everybody kind of says the agency world is changing. And the response is from a lot of agencies is like, we're not a traditional advertising agency. That's what everybody says. We're not like your everyday agency. But of course, they're focusing too much on the say and not enough on the think and the do. And that what we try and do is we try and disrupt that disruption. Because everyone's saying we're disrupting the agency world because we're not a traditional agency. But when you pull back the layers, it's the same people following the same process, doing the exact same things with the exact same outputs. So we really need to kind of disrupt that model. So we need to reframe the category of new ways of talking about what we do to new ways of adding value. That's the reframe we need to invest in. So if we look at all those things coming together, the outside macro trends are the blurred lines that exist around this business. The target insight, well, the target, they've got ROI and security. They've got a pressure to do more with less. The brand insight about the legacy and the equities of this brand of Church+State. Church+State is uniquely positioned to help clients navigate the colliding worlds of advertising and content. That's the insight. And the category insight of what the category is looking to do, or the category that surrounds us, well, this is that disruption has become commoditized and it is a race to the middle. It's a bunch of people saying the exact same things about how they're changing the agency model. Now, the relevance of the overlap between what the target wants and what this brand, Church+State, delivers is this idea that brands need to be media properties and media properties need to be brands. We're really relevant in that space because not many other people own that. Now, what's the difference? Well, we're different because this idea of brand conviction that a lot of agencies talk about cut through the clutter, seize attention. But in our opinion, if you don't balance that with earning trust along the way and building brand conviction, it's a little bit too much like American Idol. You're just kind of cut through that one time. But the reality is you're not going to have a lasting business. You're not going to have a lasting career. So this is the brand difference. That is it is about seizing attention and earning trust along the way. And then the overlap between what the target wants and nobody in the category, including us, delivers, is new ways of adding value in that category reframe. So once we have that as part of our think, we then look at the brand belief, the mission, and the vision. This is part of the process. Step 2. So step 1, discovering insights, the trends, and the analysis of your target, your brand, and your category. And I gave you our example. Now, based on that example, well, what's the brand belief? Well, our brand belief is that we believe that people used to vote with their wallets, but now they vote with their time. And if they don't trust you, and if it's not relevant enough, entertaining enough, informative enough, you're not going to win the battle for time. That is our fundamental belief around everything we do, whether it's writing a book, doing a podcast, or cranking out Facebook ads. Everything must win the battle for time. That's what we fundamentally believe. Now, based on that, then, what is our mission? Well, our mission is we help brands build brand conviction with their clients and their customers and their employees, which is important. We look internally as well as externally, and their partners. This exact same process you can use to motivate and inspire and build brand conviction inside your organization as well as outside your organization. And then a vision is, kind of more forward thinking of to lead the agency world into a new era defined by more relevant, more effective, more value generating work, and for our people, a more meaningful employee experience. So we've got that. That's the think part covered. Now, what do we do with the do? Well, we really look at the essential do, and we do an organizational action audit, and you should do the same. So what is your essential do? Your essential do, it really just aligns and connects your brand belief with the single most important thing you do to drive revenue. What is it? What is your essential do? So for Church+State, the brand belief is we believe that people used to vote with their wallets, now they vote with their time. So you need to use that word "so" in between your brand belief and your essential do to ensure that it is strategically relevant. Because if you say, we believe that the earth isn't too important to lose, so we make candy. That doesn't work. That doesn't connect. The brand belief is not about cause. The brand belief is not about social justice and social issues. Those are important, but they're not the reason you're in business. So you really need to dig deep into that brand belief. Don't be lazy about it. Don't just attach your brand belief to the latest cause because it's important, and they are. But they're not brand beliefs. So in our case, we believe this, so we help brands win the battle for time. And we build brand conviction with clients, customers, employees, and partners, which you may remember is really part of our mission. So the essential do can be your mission. We believe this, so we do this one thing. Now, beyond that, we go, okay, to help drive other actions, because you need to do other things other than your essential do. You need to do tactical do's. You need to do experiential do's. You need to do internal do's. What are those? Well, you first need to go, well, who are we doing this for? The target was the main primary person that you get your revenue from. But who do you do it for beyond that? Well, CMOs of large businesses for Church+State. Who we do it for? CMOs of large businesses, of growing businesses, of personal brands. We do a lot of work with executives and Olympians and speakers and thought leaders on building their own personal brands. We work with executives on the people who want to build brand conviction inside their organization, not outside, inside. So we work with executives who want to do that. And lastly, who do we do it for? We also do it for the important people who are on our team, the Church+State team. We do it for one another. Now, what do they want us to do? Well, CMOs want us to make them a star internally and externally. To use a line that Susan Irving, who's from Kruger Products, a very talented and brilliant marketer and a lovely person, and she said that, the team, what she tells her team is that let's make this organization better than we found it. And I think that's such a great way to summarize what marketers need to do. You just make it better than you found it. And we help organizations do that. We advise them with honesty and transparency, remembering they've got ROI and security, right? We are efficient with their time and money. That's what they want us to do. They want us to be efficient with their time and their money. They want us to be the best partner at the table. Any agency is at the table because there's now 25 agencies around the table. You know what? CMOs don't want us to bitch and complain about like this agency is doing this and this. Just be the best partner at the table. That, we think, is what CMOs want from their agencies. And then lastly, CMOs want agencies to be reactive, but they also want agencies to be proactive. And being proactive is coming to them with ideas that you were never briefed on. We think those are the ideas that often are the disruptive ideas that really, really add impact and value to brands. So that's what CMOs want. But our team wants us to do stuff too. So what do they want? Our team wants us to provide meaningful employment, to provide an environment and a culture that they can belong to. They want us to treat them like the professionals that they are, regardless of their age, regardless of their experience or their background. And lastly, they want us to provide opportunities for growth and development. And if those opportunities will not exist at Church+State because they want to develop an opportunity in a really specific area that's outside of our core strength, we'll help them find that opportunity. That's what employees want from organizations. Give me opportunities for growth and development, and help me, if it's not here, where I can get that outside the organization from other learning opportunities or other courses or other places or other people. That's what teams want. And then, well, who do we do it with? These are members of our broader team. So yes, we do it with our Church+State team. We also do it with Airfoil, our production partners. We do it with our partners in other ways. We have a number of freelancers and friends of the agency who work with us on a wide variety of different things. We also know that we do it with our clients' other agency partners, that we need to respect, that we need to empower, that we need to collaborate with. We also do it with the Canadian advertising community. We think that we have to have a professional pillar of understanding that we're all in this together, and that we try and contribute to that community with positivity and with promotion and thought leadership. And then lastly, industry publications like The Message and Strategy Magazine, a playback. These are really, really critical for all of us learning and all of us developing. So we need to support those people with subscriptions, with our money, and with our time. So who do we do it for? What do they want us to do? And who do we do it with? So now you know that at this process, we go, okay, well, what's the say part? If we believe in something and your organization actually lives up to it with actions and behaviors and products and essential do's and tactical do's, that's worth talking about. So if it's worth talking about, you really should talk about it in an interesting and compelling way. So that's the part of the say. So the first part of the say is we need a creative platform. We need an external version of what we think and what we do. So that's the say. Now, this creative platform really comprises branding and design, the name of your brand, of your company, the design of that company, of that brand. Then out of that, you need a brand narrative. The brand narrative is the story of this brand that can be sliced and diced into a million different ways. Thirdly, your creative platform needs to be extended to an advertising context. Sometimes you just need to run ads or some version of that that's in the blurry line gray area. And then finally, what is that piece of content? What is the content that you're cranking out? Because content is where people look for research and information and inspiration. So what are you doing with it? This is how we develop creative platforms. So if we look at the branding and design aspect, of course, the first thing we ask ourselves is this name of this brand or organization the right name given what they fundamentally believe and what they fundamentally do? So our agency used to be called the Tight Group. And as you can imagine, as I've now walked you through our fundamental beliefs and about other partners being at the table, I remember looking at this and deciding, no, this is no longer the right name. And when I went to the team to say, we need to change our name, the brief was really less tight, more group. This is not Ron's agency. There's 25 active, thoughtful, experienced professionals. There's 2 other equity partners. This is not about tight. This is about the group. So when we look at that, say, well, with all that strategy that we have just done, what's a name that should be applied to that? So of course, this is where we develop Church+State. Now, Church+State, people often ask, how'd you come up with the name Church+State? I mean, how'd you think about it? The reality is a good friend, Bram Warshawski, who runs a company called Shelfgram. He's a brilliant guy, good friend, and we've collaborated on a number of different things. And we were just in a conversation one day, and I mentioned the idea of this unification of Church+State. And I kept saying Church+State. This is critical to advertising. And it was Bram who said, that'd be a great name for an agency. And it was like 2 years before we rebranded. And so we went into this exercise. It was like, I think Bram was right. I think we need to call this place Church+State. Now, you also start to see the design. The plus sign was really, really critical. Why? Because it is the unification of Church+State. So that's how we landed on that. Now, once we end up with a name and a logo, well, now we need to develop colors and primary icons. So, you'll see that the U and the A, when you kind of combine them in this really unique way, you end up with this primary icon, which is the yellow and white, and then secondary icons that use the other colors. And of course, the other colors, well, we thought that the agency world was going down kind of, a really specific color palette, and they wanted to be unique and different. So we took the core elements of the CMYK colors, and that's what you see here. So in one, they're not primary colors, but they are possibly design primary colors. But they were also bright, and they were positive, and they were optimistic, things that we think define the agency. So that those colors are really critical, both in terms of how are you going to separate yourself from the category, but also how are those colors and fonts going to really communicate through branding and design what you fundamentally believe in and the tone of the people that work with your organization. So, and then out of that, then you need to develop a brand design system. How do those colors and icons and everything come in so that you can design PowerPoint slides, so you can design internal office environments? And so this work was done by the great Lionel Wong, who was our former creative director. Lionel did an amazing job of building out both the colors and the logos and this design system, which is still a part of our office. And so you start to see where the lines start coming in, of the intersection of these lines and the colors and the plus signs. And then you start to see how we, kind of apply it to different things, be it business cards and letterhead and internal office design, things like that. Now, once you've got the branding and design, now you need a brand narrative. What is the story of this brand? So the story of your brand needs to really answer these 5 questions. This is your story from beginning to end. What's going on in the world through your lens? What problem does that create? What do you fundamentally believe about that problem? How do you solve that problem? And why should we believe you? So, why, if I'm talking to you about the Church+State brand narrative, why should you believe us? Why should you believe that story? So I'll give you an example. This is how we applied in a very fast way a brand narrative to church and state. So what's going on in the world? People don't know what's an ad, what's content, and what the difference between the two is. That's what's going on in the world. Okay, what problem does that create? Look, people don't know where to look and they don't know who to trust. Right. Well, what did we believe about that problem? We believe that people used to vote with their wallets and now they vote with their time. And then how do you solve that problem? Well, we help brands win the battle for time and help them build brand conviction with clients, customers, employees, partners, and communities. And you should believe us because we're honest, we're transparent, we're experienced. Our clients are all, very well-respected clients. And you know what? You can speak to any client, you can speak to any partner, or you can speak to any current member of our staff on whether this is true or not. Now, we also have an internal brand narrative that we applied inside the organization. So internally, what's going on in the world for our staff? Well, look, creative opportunities are everywhere, right? There are more types of agencies than more types of craft beers, and client-side opportunities are far better now than they ever have been. Okay, so what problem does that create? Well, maybe agency life isn't as fulfilling as it used to be, but it can be. What do we believe about that problem? We believe that everyone, regardless of where you work, deserves to be happy and fulfilled. And they should only work. Any of you should only work where you can do both. You need to be happy and you need to be fulfilled. So how do we solve that problem? Well, look, we provide meaningful clients, interesting opportunities, and career growth. That's what we provide. And if we can't do it for you, we will help you find a place that can. Now, why should you believe us? Well, talk to our people. Just talk to them. Just go and reach out on LinkedIn and say, is Ron, is this full of BS? Or is this place a really good place to work? That's the story. Now, then we need, of course, you as part of your creative platform need some advertising. So what is that campaign? If you were to redesign the entire organization, how does the creative platform get extended into advertising? This was a mural that Duro III did in our previous office, which we just kind of said, these are all the things out that are really competing for time. So if we were to have an ad, well, maybe this is kind of what that would be. Remembering that it's also about content, and we generate content for ourselves as well as for clients. So you need to decide what content you're going to generate. But for us, we've got a couple of books. Think to Say, Everyone's an Artist, published through HarperCollins in 2016. We have State of the Nation on the website. We have, the most outstanding business podcast of 2019, The Coup, that we did in partnership with the Rogers Frequency Podcast Network. And we do white papers and thought leadership pieces like Brand in the Time of COVID that are available on our website. So we're constantly kind of pumping out content. And from a social standpoint, we're very active on LinkedIn, constantly testing out thinking in that space because it's really safe and it's not directly for any of our clients. So the reason we share a lot to LinkedIn is because that gives, we get feedback on our immediate thinking, and then we perfect that thinking before we apply it to clients. So this is what you need to do. You need to generate content and need to isolate what that content is. Now, the last part of this is whether it's a content or whether it's an ad, that you need to plan that out. And we do this as part of our strategic exercise. And we do it really in this way, which is, what is it? Like, what's the thing? Secondly, where does it go? Like, where does this get distributed? Third, once I've consumed it or seen it, where do I go now? And then fourthly, if it's a bigger piece of content or ad or something in the middle, well, how am I slicing and dicing that so that I can post that in other places, on other platforms, to really tease the bigger piece that exists out there? So that's the slicing and dicing. So that's what we've done. We've taken Think, Do, Say as an operating system. We walked you through how you can apply that to your organization. Don't hire us, just apply this. Go ahead. But we used Church+State as the example of how we applied it to ourselves. There's a reason we do the things we do. There's a reason we're called Church+State, why our color palette is what it is, why the content we develop is what it is. There's a reason for all of that. It's a strategic reason. You need to align for your brand, for your organization, what you fundamentally believe in, what you fundamentally do, and how you fundamentally talk about it. You can think it, you can do it, you can say it. Any other questions? We're here to help. Thanks for watching.